I'm Luke Kelly, and I'm the founder of the Line and Length movement, dedicated to ripping the covers off mental health stigma. After a rough spell with my mental health, I contacted a large number of mates to come together to play a game of cricket with a very unique point of difference. In between innings, a supportive platform was provided where those who felt comfortable showing some vulnerability openly spoke about their personal mental health journey. Thus, the Line and Length movement was born. While we are not mental health experts on this podcast, we are always here to support. So if you or anyone you know is feeling a bit flat, please have a talk to the experts like Lifeline, Beyond Blue, or a medical professional. Today's episode is sponsored by Picker Financial Solutions. The support that Justin Picker is providing will go a long way in assisting the Line and Length movement in ripping the covers off mental health. While we here at Line and Length focus on mental health, Picker Financial Solutions can help you with your financial health. And now, on to this week's episode of This Is Your Line and Length.
G'day everyone, welcome to this week's episode of This Is Your Line and Length. I'm your host Aiden, joined here by Kels and this week's guest, Jay Mathieson. How are we today, fellas?
Yeah, I'm going real well, thanks Aiden. Really pumped to have Matho on the show.
I'm great, boys. Cannot wait to get stuck in. Been really looking forward to having a chat with you guys and yeah, try to be part of the positive message that we're putting out there.
Awesome. Thanks. Thank you for being a part. Thank you for reaching out to sort of join us. Mate, I've got to start by saying you've always had that sort of larger than life personality ever since I met you on Job. And you continued that into, from what I understand, straight out of uni going into Contiki. Is that where your first step was, or what did you do after you left uni and I didn't get to see you anymore?
Yeah, well, it was unfortunate that we didn't get to catch up enough, but I spent about 18 months saving to go over to Europe. I worked in horse syndication for a little bit, sort of doing media and sales and that, and then didn't really have enough money to get overseas, but went anyway, and spent the best part of the next 2 years, firstly traveling around for 6 months, and then moved to London, and then from there got a job with Contiki, which I loved most of my time there. There was certainly a lot of hard times, and you often didn't know when your next paycheck or how much your next paycheck was going to be. But yeah, there were some really nice times that were in there for the most part.
Jay, how did you fall into this line of Contiki work? I mean, there's a fair few people out there that have been on Contikis, but haven't found themselves, I guess, employed by Contiki. What was the magic trick, you think, for you?
I wouldn't say there's any trick, mate. And I appreciate that. As sort of Aiden said, I suppose I'm one of those more talkative kind of characters that you meet, to put it in a nice way, I suppose. But I went to Contiki myself, and I had a great time, and I was with a few mates. Actually, a couple of the boys, or one of the boys who does Line and Length now in Court Ward, and then a couple of other mates, and just really loved it. And speaking to my guide throughout that, she sort of gave me a little bit of a push, saying, "Oh yeah, this might be something that would be good for you." And I didn't think too much of it at first, and then sort of the more I thought about it, I thought, well, what a cool lifestyle it would be to travel around and get to meet new people and have a few beers and get to see all the sights. So and every year I pretty much came back, particularly as you've probably heard before, Kel, and a few of the others who through Line and Length, I always said, just one more year and then I'll be back, sort of thing. And 1 year pretty quickly turned into 7 or 8 years, and going from Contiki on to Trafalgar, and like I said, it was a pretty addictive in a lot of ways. So,
What's the stepping stone, Jay, in terms of getting that gig at Contiki? I mean, is there much work that goes into that? I mean, are there week-long courses going into it, or do you just rock up and here's your Contiki badge? Good luck.
Yes. No, it's a good question, Kel. There's a lot more than probably what you think. Because everyone, when you say, oh, particularly to a young guy that you're a Contiki guide, they go, oh, how good, you get pissed and you get to travel around, and that's all it really is. But so for just to get in, we went through our interview process, group interview and normal interview, like everything, and then to prep us going on, we had to write an assignment, and my assignment was around about 150,000 words. So a novel, and then
that's more than what you pumped out of uni.
Yeah, exactly. By about 6 times, mate. And I spent, and I couldn't quite start that one the night before either. So yeah, I had to actually spend some time researching. So went through all that, and then come onto a training course that goes for 10 weeks. And through that, it is changing a little bit these days, but you're very deprived of sleep. You have to do talks on each places. You're sitting up writing talks. And while you're on the coach, as you're going around, it's, in 5 minutes time, we'll get a talk from Jay. You get up, you deliver a talk. And one of the things they originally tried to do was try to focus a little bit on the negatives, because the things that we saw out on the road were some pretty heavy kind of things. You think of all the great, drinking stories and fun times, and for all of those, that there were stacks of those, but there's those other times where you're dealing with people who have mental health issues, with possible incidents of alleged sexual assaults and all of those kind of things that you never really think could possibly come up. So they really want to make sure that you're hardened and ready to take, ready to hear those things. And if you can't sort of get through those, you're either given the option to leave or they'll ask you to leave. But if you get through that 10 weeks with all your study sort of behind you and the sort of grown you into a guide like that, you get to go out and you have 53 people that you lead blindly around Europe for a while. So yeah.
Mate, that's some pretty heavy stuff that they kind of prepare you for. Did they give you a lot of assistance with dealing with that mentally, or did you kind of have to build that resilience on your own?
No, I'd say it's probably something you learn on your own. With something like with a lot of those issues, because they're so personal and very touchy, I suppose, areas. Everyone has their own way of sort of getting to that kind of level. Some people are a little bit more, I'll be there for you. Some people are like, well, if you need me, I'm over here, but I'm not going to be right there. And every case is a little bit different. And it is one of those things that I learned that really probably hurt my mental health as well. Listening back to some of the other boys on the podcast, particularly when Kel was on, one of the things that I realized was that I was putting sort of everyone else before I put myself, because, that's what I thought my role was. And when that sort of went away from that kind of thing, it was like, well, hang on, there's something not quite right with me as well. And a way I tried to almost get away from the things that weren't right with me was by like, well, how can I help this person out? I can help them, and I know that's me doing the right thing, and sort of neglected myself a little bit. So they've certainly got better, and just like we have, as time has gone on, the Travel Corporation, who's was my big employer, they've really helped as time has gone on with our mental health and looking into that and knowing when you need a break. But 10 years ago, it was still very much in its infancy. So it's something they've got better at, I think, as time's gone on.
Mate, what is it that you do? Like you're on a bus with 53 people for, up to like, I think a couple of Contikis go for like up to 8 weeks. How is it that you kind of looked after your own mental health once you realized that was an important thing for you, when you really don't have a lot of time to yourself?
It was a struggle. It was a real struggle. The first, I probably didn't realize how much I was struggling until line and length came up in its very first year. A little bit like all of us, that stigma attached with it. I was Jay. I'm the joker. I'm the one who's there to make everyone laugh and have a good time. And until sort of we had the very first cricket game, which I'm so glad Kel invited me along to, and I managed to get to in Sydney because I was back. It's the first time I'd really sort of spoken to anyone like, this is taking a toll on me, being with other people. And I think that was sort of the catalyst for me trying to turn things around. And some of the things I tried originally were trying to get a little bit more healthy. I was in a fairly toxic relationship at that stage, not because of who I was with, but just because we were two big personalities that didn't quite match. And I was unhealthy in my eating habits, in my drinking habits, in my, the people that I hung out with all the time sort of thing. And I realized that sort of all had to change.
Jay, I saw a photo today, just doing a little bit of a Facebook stalking as preparation, as I like to do before these podcasts. I recall seeing a photo of you when you lost 20 kilos over a reasonably short amount of time. Do you just mind running us through, like, what was your motivation for that? What was your mentality through all that? And I guess the results after that, how you felt afterwards?
Yeah. It was, like I said, it was sort of that time when we talked about it. I remember stepping on, I was in New Zealand at the start of, when was the first line link? 2018?
Jan 2018.
2018.
Yeah.
I'd been in New Zealand on a Contiki as a guest with my partner at the time. I went to go do a bungee jump and stepped on the scales, and I swear I almost broke them. It was I was 104, 105 kilos or something along those lines, and I just sort of didn't know how I'd let myself get to that, and came back and had line and length and could barely run a single in the cricket game without sucking some really deep ones. And I thought, this is where I've got to change it. I've got to change. I know it's okay to have a drink every now and then, but I've really got to change what I'm eating, how often I'm eating, and particularly my fitness. And that's where I started running a lot. And I found running one of it's been a lifesaver in a lot of ways for me. And those endorphins are going and stuff, and you start clearing your head, and you get out there and you get some time with yourself to put things in perspective, I guess. I hadn't had that for a long time because I'd been quite unhealthy for a long time, lots of 4 and 5 a.m. nights and waking up at 6 o'clock and trying to be the happiest person of all time. So that's what I started doing. I started watching what I was eating as much as I possibly could while I was on tour. And probably when I was drinking, which was still probably an unhealthy amount, but at least sort of taking notice of what I was drinking. So staying away from sugary kind of things, and sticking to things like vodka sodas and Aperol spritz, and still love them today. So
Jay, I actually remember a little, I guess going back a little story, is that me and you ran into each other just coincidentally in Koh Samui in Thailand. And naturally we went to the bar, and you ordered vodka waters. And I was like, mate, what's going on here? Vodka waters. It's like TV static. I couldn't drink that. And you said, mate, like, I can't drink anything else. Like, you just don't want to put on weight. You're over alcohol. Like, what's it like running these Contikis when you're just expected to drink, but you're also mindful now that alcohol, is a depressant and makes you gain weight? Like, how are you trying to balance that up? Was vodka water your only answer, or did you just have to say no? Can you run us through that? What it was like for you?
Yeah, so I mean, there's certainly times when you have to say no, and I was never good at saying no. Having gone to uni with you boys, we're all probably a little bit guilty of it at certain times, but I'd certainly put myself right at the top of the list. I didn't really need much of an excuse to what I thought was to go and have a good time. But one of the big changes, I think, with when I was sort of finishing up with Contiki, the good thing was I was moving over to who I work for I guess I kind of still, I'm on the books still there with Trafalgar, but, and they're an open age kind of group. And when I say open age, I mainly work with early retirees. So the idea of going out till 4 a.m. and dancing at a club isn't really their go. They like to have a good time. They like to have a drink and all the rest, but they go to bed at sort of 8:30. And I'd set my notes on tour with them. I'd sort of pick and choose my nights. I'd like, okay, well, here's one of the dinners. I know they'll have a good time. This is where I'm going to have a few glasses of reds and watch them dance on the table and sing, Que Sera, Sera. And then all the other nights it would be like, nah, I'm going to go on a run. And Strava, strangely enough, and this is going to sound so strange, but I find that it's so unhealthy. Like Instagram and Facebook and things like that can be often really unhealthy. And for a while, Strava became my go-to form of social media, which is really strange. But seeing that I'd had a run in Dubrovnik in one night and then Sarajevo the next night, and the next week I'd gone from Madrid to Seville, and seeing these tracks that I was running, I'm like, this is cool. Like, this is my motivation to, I don't want to sit there and make myself feel depressed that all my mates at home are having a great time, sitting there enjoying themselves and I'm missing out. I'm here. Not only that, I'm getting healthy at the same time. So that was a kind of nice motivation for me there.
I'm loving hearing I'm just loving hearing you talk about all this running, Jay. And do you mind running us through the half marathon attempt you did in Valencia? It didn't quite go to plan, but you know what? We love that you had a go. So do you mind running us through that?
Yeah, so it was a 7th, 8th half marathon, I suppose, is the best way to describe it. In the end, I'd set myself a goal. 2019 was probably the toughest year that I'd have. I was really struggling on a mental level. I was just very negative. I couldn't get out of this rut, and I felt really selfish about it too. Being overseas and going to all these cool places that a lot of people don't get the chances to sort of do. But I just couldn't drop it. The only time I really could is when I was sort of running and enjoying myself. So I set myself the goal of running a half marathon. I started training. My times were pretty solid. And I got to race day. And the occasion just got to me a bit. I was running good splits the whole way around about that 4:25, 4:30 mark. I got to about 18 Ks in, and allegedly I started getting a bit of the wobbles, but I can't remember the last K in a bit. But apparently I sort of had a bit of a wobble, and I've hit the ground like a sack of spuds at 19.3 Ks. And then I sort of woke up with a police officer around me, a couple of randoms around me. And my Spanish is only beginner, I would say. And trying to listen to these people speaking Spanish around me when I've got heat stroke and dehydration, I thought I could have been on the moon for best I knew at that stage. But look, it was something I set myself. I didn't quite finish, but I was quite proud of that I got to that stage. And when COVID finishes, I'll be back in Valencia to finish that that half marathon. I know. So,
mate, good on you for giving it a go. I mean, there's not many people that can run 19 Ks at the best of times. So at least you had a crack. That's the sort of attitude we're all about.
That was the other thing, Kel. If you told me the year before that I was going to run 19 Ks at an average of 4:30 pace, I would have laughed in your face. I would have said it's impossible. When I started running, I struggled to run 2 Ks at 6 minutes sort of thing, without stopping and pulling in deep. As I said, I struggled to run a single in our cricket game at one stage. Yeah, so right. To get there, I was, like I said, it was it was still an achievement for me.
Yeah, absolutely.
How did you find the process of sort of building up to that marathon? Was that kind of what you think sort of really helped with that sort of rut that you were in, was setting those goals and breaking them?
Yeah, I think that was my main focus of that year, because that's, like I said, that's where I was really struggling. And And in my head, my big thing was, well, if I can do this run, then I've really achieved something. And I was trying to tick off the boxes to make everything else healthy. And then I thought my mind would sort of follow, because I thought if I start eating better, that'll help. If I start being more fit, then I think my mind will come along with it. And it wasn't immediate, but it did come. And like I said, surrounding myself with those, with the right kind of people, I think has really, really helped that. Like, there is no day that I look forward to more now than line and length, and the cut that goes on. Like this year, 2020, when we had our last one, I'd been, I'd come back from, I think, Japan at that stage. I'd got off the plane the night before. I was there for 2 days, and then straight away I flew out. Like 3 days later, I flew out to South America and had to come back up to Gold Coast. And I was that set on getting there just because I knew what a great environment and how much that had helped in past years was. So, like I can't sort of thank Kel and everyone else who's been involved enough because it really has helped, probably more than you will even ever know. And it's just been such a powerful thing for me, and I know many others who probably haven't even said it as much as as I am right now. So
it's really powerful to hear you say that, Jay. I really appreciate that. It's definitely a very special thing to me, and obviously we've got plans and things going on behind the scenes at the moment, so a few big announcements to come, hopefully. So watch this space.
Cannot wait for that.
And certainly do have plenty of fun things in the works. Jay, I want to go back to something you said a while ago, specifically around sort of Instagram, Facebook, and sort of social media. You said that you started to use Strava as your sort of main social media form because you viewed it a little bit more positively. Run us through, if you care to share, sort of like why do you view Facebook and Instagram sort of so negatively?
Look, it certainly has its positives behind it. There's no doubting that, and it can be a lot of fun, and I still use it today. But I think it's very much got to be in moderation. I think Instagram and Facebook, it certainly paints a picture for what's going on, but whether it's the right picture is probably something that's up for debate, I guess. I think about many times when I was overseas, and I was posting all these things about how great life is. Look at me drinking down a glass of red here in Italy, whatever it happens to be. But a lot of the time, what I was posting there and what I was actually feeling was almost the complete opposite. And I found myself at times as well when I was sitting there, like quite lonely after a day, because although you're surrounded by a lot of people the whole time, you don't get a lot of you time, and you also don't get to be surrounded by your true friends who are sort of back home. So it can become really lonely sort of. And I found myself sitting there flicking through Instagram, on nights that I wasn't out, hour after hour, looking at all this stuff. And I'm like, look how happy everyone was. And it just made me more depressed, more, and felt like I was really missing out. And I just get myself further and further down by doing that. So that was one of the things that I tried to stay away from a little bit. I'd sort of banned myself so much from looking at stories. I set myself that I could only ever look at Instagram for a max of, I think it was 10 or 15, or I started at 20 minutes and I brought myself down to 15 and brought my then self down to 10. And now I just sort of, I'll do it occasionally to see how everyone's going, but it's sort of like oh yeah, that's there, as opposed to, oh my gosh, I need to check what everyone else is doing, which is where it became unhealthy. Yeah,
I'm the same, Jay, in terms of limiting my social media time with Facebook and Insta. So I've only got it on my iPad. So I don't carry my iPad around everywhere. So I'm limited to, if I go on social media, specifically when I'm on my iPad, but I find that makes me more aware I'm on it. And you're right, like when you're on it, like once you've finished doing your scrolling on Facebook or Insta, you don't feel any better, do you?
No,
You never come out feeling better.
no.
That's just why I've limited mine.
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you, Kel. Like I can't think of one time when I sort of sat there and thought, oh yeah, geez, I feel so much better about myself. And
I agree.
That's a problem in a lot of it. And as I said, it does hold its purpose, because sometimes you get on and, I could see a photo of you two boys together and I'm like, awesome, Aiden and Kel together, having a great time. Love that. But once you've seen every single one of your mates, what looks like having the best time, you go, well, I'm not having that best time, am I? So, that's why I think limiting it down is probably a good way to do it.
You mentioned as well that when you're on Contiki, you're kind of surrounded by all of these people, but you don't always feel like you're, sometimes you can still feel alone, even though you are surrounded by those people. How did you kind of get around that? Like you're doing this sort of as your career. How do you get yourself through those moments?
Originally, I drank way too much. Is how I did, and that's not particularly healthy. To mask probably some of the feelings that I had, or to block out something, it was just drink until I black out and wake up in the next morning and I assume I had a good time and do it all again. Yeah, I mean, it's a real funny one, because you are surrounded by people, but a lot of the time, I've said this to a few mates before, a lot of the times it does feel like the most lonely job in the world. I think trying to keep in contact with, like I said, surrounding yourself with the right people and keeping in contact with the right people is good. I started at the start of last year, the end of 2019, I started speaking to a professional in terms of like a psychologist, just because I couldn't break the cycle. And I felt really nervous about doing that at first. But hearing and speaking to people, like at Line and Length and other people probably made me realize it's nothing to be embarrassed about. I've loved what's been said in previous podcasts and at the days themselves. Again, I know you've mentioned a couple of times, whether it was Jackie G that said your brain's a muscle as well, and that sort of needs to be fixed. I think it was him. I can't exactly remember. And it's just so true. I wouldn't be embarrassed if I, pull the hamstring. It's just something that happens, kind of thing. So why be embarrassed if my brain isn't, I pulled a string on my brain.
Yeah, that's what, as I said I've said this in a previous episode. We want a discussion about going to the psychologist to be as common as a discussion about going to the physio. That's sort of a goal for this, I guess, podcast, and normalization of conversations around this whole area of mental health.
Certainly, just because, Jay, you've mentioned things here that are slightly different from the way that, previous boys such as we had Bear, we had Charlie Newton, Lombi, they've all mentioned different strategies on how they've dealt with their mental health issues. And you've come up with different ones yourself. And that's, what works for one person might not work for another person. But hey, if we're all sort of talking about it, then, there's different strategies out there that might work for everyone. And, what works for me might work for you. And if it doesn't, then cool. Is there something that I may have heard about that could help that? And, that's what we're trying to do here.
And I think one of the other things as well that probably a lot of the things, and even some of my actions that I was doing during those times, and I probably wasn't even aware of them, were a call out for help. And a lot of people, because there is a stigma still around mental health, although it is getting better, people don't quite recognise and realise that what is being done or what's going on is a bit of a call out for help. And part of something like this, which I think is just so cool, is educating people and helping them to realise these sort of things. So when someone gets to that stage where they are really struggling, and they might not say, hey, look, I'm struggling, it might be in a different way that someone else can recognise and go, hey, look, Kel looks like he's struggling. Aiden looks like he's struggling. Why don't I go up and see if he's all right, or if there's something else that we can do? And I think that's such an awesome part of the message that this podcast and Line and Length does, because it is making it much more real and sort of bringing it out into society more and more. Because I know when it first came along, I hate to say it, but I sort of was in that kind of like, oh, you know, someone's playing, I did see professional sports, and I'm like, someone's playing the mental health card. What's that kind of thing? And it was just naivety on my point, on my part, sort of thing. And the more we can get it out there, the more people can sort of understand that there's a lot more to it, I think.
Mate, you said something pretty interesting. You said something pretty interesting there about sort of there were points in time where you think that they were cries for help, whether you noticed them or not. With sort of hindsight looking back, would you care to share any of those that stood out for you, that you think that were calls for help without you actually calling for help?
I'd probably, I can remember one particular incident. It was only sort of at the start or towards the end of 2019. Again, I was sort of coming back I was going to come back to Australia around my birthday, which would have been my 30th birthday. And I spoke to two pretty close mates at the time. And I knew they were going to be in Melbourne. And I said, well, I'll fly down and see you. We'll all be together. It'll be great, kind of thing. And their response was like, oh, we're actually busy that day, but we'd like to, why don't we catch up a little bit later on? And instead of me being quite reasonable and going, oh yeah, that's fair enough, I sort of took it as like, what's wrong with me? Why won't you hang out with me on my birthday? I made it an absolutely massive deal, acted like a bit of a pork chop, and sort of that friendship, those friendships with those people sort of has been tarnished a little bit. And it's really regrettable, sort of looking back on it now, because there were two people that I genuinely loved and still do today. But because of how I kind of acted, and it wasn't like, you know, it wasn't me sort of taking a step back and being like, well, hang on, this is a really reasonable thing that they're saying. I just couldn't understand that it wasn't like, I thought they were rejecting me, and that's not what they were doing at all. It was, you know, just a reasonable excuse for what was going on. Like I said, it's something I've never spoken about that probably out loud before. But it's certainly something that I recognise probably the more as time's gone on.
No, thank you for sharing that, mate. Sticking on the topic of kind of hindsight, knowing everything that you know now, what single piece of advice would you give yourself as a teenager?
That's a really good question. As a teenager, I'd say maybe, first of all, don't be too hard on yourself. We can often be our own worst enemies. And a lot of us, and I know myself included, are our own harshest critics. And often a lot of those things that we're so harsh to ourselves about, there's nothing that we can do. It might be time or circumstance that's against us. And the more that life goes on, I'm trying to have that kind of philosophy. I know that, you know, with the half marathon, for example, I look at that, and if, you know, at different times, and, you know, even at that initial time, I was like, oh my God, I'm a failure. I can't believe I finished it. It's so embarrassing. But the more I took of that, I was like, no, this is a lesson I can learn. Look how far I've gotten. Right. This is great. But next time I can go back. So not being too harsh on yourself, and sort of, I think that would probably be the best bit of advice to give my 18-year-old self.
So Jay, what's this whole podcast experience taught you about yourself? Yeah,
it's a really good question, Kel. I I think it's probably taught about me and probably everyone that although we're all the same kind of people, you know, and we're all the people that we know, that we can certainly have like a different variety of levels, which is like a really good thing. Like, you know, you're still, Kel, you're still the same awesome bloke, you know, laughable, the first bloke, just always a smile on your face kind of thing. But there's a much sort of deeper kind of side. And I think Aiden on that same kind of level as well. You know, going from what I knew of you at uni in terms of like, always up for a beer, ready to go, to this much more poignant and someone who's not that you weren't, like I said, ever caring, but just like really sort of caring and very, you know, someone who challenges you kind of thing. I think seeing that, and same with myself, like I've always more been that loud over the top kind of personality, not that I'm not loud now, but someone who can sort of go that little bit deeper. And I think the whole line and length experience, not just this podcast, but that taught me that, because I probably didn't know, you know, I knew that I was emotional. I've always known that I'm pretty emotional, but I probably didn't know I had as many levels as I did now. And I just, as I said, the whole line and length experience has just been so great. And I get so excited anytime there's an event that comes up, or I get to catch up with someone, or, you know, even if it could be just as simple as reaching out to someone who's been on the podcast, or someone I haven't spoken to in a while. Like, got to see the Cohen boys the other week and just had a catch up with them about their, you know, not only their life, but their mental health and stuff as well. So it's brought just a whole new dimension to a lot of our friendships, which is awesome. Really, really cool.
Jay, you're exactly right. Like, something I've found is like this whole mental health discussion and conversation that we're opening up. I'm literally seeing a complete other side to every single one of like my friends, you know, that I didn't know that was there. This deeper side to them. You are so spot on the money there with that statement. It's really something that I'm, you know, really happy about, and I really enjoy it as well.
Yeah, I agree, mate. It's great. They're still the same people that you know and love, but
that's right.
To learn the complexities about them that you probably didn't know from, you know, whether it be the footy field or you know, the dorm or whatever it happens to be, and it's really cool.
Yeah.
Jay, before we let you go and we stop pestering you with all the questions that we've got, Kels was telling me you're going through a little bit of a rough time with your partner at the moment about getting a visa. How's that been weighing on you, mate?
I wouldn't say it's a rough time. I'd probably, if you looked at it maybe in terms of previously how I'd looked at things, I would have looked at it as a rough time. But I look at it as something that's really quite positive now. So I've been with my partner now for just over a year, Liz, who will probably have a listen to this at some point as well. She's been a massive person in my life that's helped me in a lot of ways. She was one of the people who made it so easy to talk to about probably my struggles with mental health, and didn't sort of, you know, whether, you know, wouldn't say that people laugh at those kind of things, but really kind of took the time to listen to me, and probably saw those cries for help that I was talking about, but didn't before. So she was over here for 6 months. We went from sort of zero to hero, where we were sort of living together after, you know, we skipped the dating phase and just went straight to living with one another. And now we're looking at getting a visa for her to come over here. And at times it's tough. I wish she was here every day. I miss her and all. But the idea that I'm going to get to spend the rest of my life with her eventually is the thing that sort of drives me. So, and knowing as well that there's other people out there that probably are going through much tougher situations than I am. You know, I try not to sort of weigh down on woe is me kind of thing. I try to look at it like, how exciting is it going to be when she gets to move over to Australia, the best country in the world.
We better tell the listeners where Liz actually is.
Oh yeah, sorry. So she's from the States. She'll probably hear this and be like, is Australia the best country in the world? So yeah, I haven't quite got her thinking it's the best country in the world yet. But yeah, she's making the big move to come over here, and I'm so pumped for it. I can't wait till the day that we're back together. So hopefully I'll get to see her in the States first. Then all the visa stuff's approved. We're going to be submitting physically all our documents probably tonight or tomorrow, and then it's the waiting process from there to hope she gets approved. And she's one of the good ones from the States, so it should be all good.
Jay, I can only imagine what it's like doing this whole long distance through this whole COVID period, the stress and the anxiety of that. So I guess for the listeners, I did long distance last year. I was living in Wagga. My partner was in Darwin, and we were both school teachers. So every school holidays, we'd sort of, we'd spend each holidays together, and we'd have to, find, I guess, loopholes in state laws so we could legally see each other. But what's that like? And I know that from a personal experience caused me so much anxiety, and like, Christ, am I actually going to get to see her these holidays? Like, I was checking the news like constantly, like every couple of hours to see if there'd been an outbreak or a border closure or something along those lines. That's just in the same country, mate. It must be tough doing the whole Australia, USA long distance thing with this whole COVID thing going wild.
Yeah, well, I'd actually be interested to hear a little bit from you too, Kel, just after this, because I'm sure you've probably experienced a lot of the things that that I have. There's a hell of a lot of frustration with different governments. There's the most frustration I think comes from the not knowing. As an Aussie right now, I struggle to get my head around the idea of like, well, if I want to go over here and say, I'll be over here for X amount of time until I can't even do that. Like that is, I really struggle to grasp that. And I know Liz struggles to grasp with that too. But I think the biggest way that we get through is by trying to talk those things out. And by looking at the end goal as well. Because we have our little tiffs and fights. To be honest, nowhere near as much as I thought we would, considering that we're doing this. But to talk things out and sort of try to make it, each other realize each other's points, and then try to be like, well, yep, this is bad now, but look how good it's going to be in the future and all that. That's the main thing that we're trying to focus on. And the end goal, like Kel, I'm so pumped for you now because you're at that end goal. You're there in Darwin, you moved up with your partner, you look happy as Larry, you're probably sweating.
Thanks, mate.
You're probably sweating more than any other man has ever sweat up in Darwin as well. But,
constantly heavy sweat on this bloke.
but seeing seeing something like you and being at the end goal, that's something that drives me as well. That's all we can do, because at the moment, if I get myself worried, if I get myself anxious, I try to bring that back. And I'm so lucky to have a partner who's been so supportive and helps me get to those realizations when I have my rant about, I can't believe the Queensland government shutting everything down again, or whatever my rant happens to be on.
Jay, one of the things I found helped me was just, you had to be honest with not just your partner, but with the friends around you, like being honest in terms of, if you're lonely, say that you're lonely. Like I was vocalizing that to my close circle of friends in Wagga, like I just feel lonely without her around me. And that's sort of something that I guess in the past would have been seen as a bit of a weakness, like harden up or you'd be right. But you know what? I was, and that's how I felt. So I vocalized that.
Yeah, man, super good point. That it's in certain stages. It's all good to have the macho kind of culture, but I think standing up for what you actually kind of believe. Like when someone, something as simple, I know you talked about like the vodka water and the vodka soda things in that kind of regard. Like I'll sit there and someone might be like, oh, look at you, you're fairy, you're drinking vodka sodas. And I'm like, I like the taste and that's fine by me. So you can enjoy your beer and that's cool. And, or even like, poking fun at those kind of situations because we feel what we feel and that's not going to change. So, I totally agree with you there, mate. I think it's a great way to do it.
All right, guys. I think it's a really nice place to kind of wrap this up. Jay, mate, thank you so much for coming on and sharing such a wide variety of stories. I think this is probably going to be the longest podcast we've had so far, and it feels like we definitely could have continued on for a couple of longer hours.
Sorry about that, boys. I've been known to talk, so
mate. For the people listening, we're recording at night, and it's just gone longer and longer. Jay, it's sort of got that feel of a Leighton Hewitt Australian Open tennis match. 5 setter, put the coffee on.
It could have gone for a little bit longer. You're sitting there going like, come on, it's got to end, but it's also all right.
But I'm really loving it.
Jay, thanks once again, mate. I really, really appreciate you sort of sharing all your stories, and sort of to those listening that are inspired by what Jay said, or anyone else that we've had on our podcast. If you want to be a part of this, please reach out to either myself or Kels. We would love to sort of have anyone on to tell their story and to share what they're comfortable sharing. And Jay, I'm hoping that you can attest to the fact that we create a pretty fun environment to have a bit of a chat in and sort of catch up. And I look forward to the many more podcasts I get to put out with Kels and Jay, you as well. I'm sure that we're going to have a follow-up episode where we get to chat about even more stuff. And
absolutely,
that's it from us here at This Is Like Your Line and Length. And stay tuned next week, and we'll have our next episode up.
Thanks so much, boys. Legends.
Good on you, Jay.
This episode of This Is Your Line and Length was brought to you by Picker Financial Solutions. Picker Financial Solutions can help you with your financial well-being. This includes restructuring your finances, purchasing your first home, or purchasing an investment property. To reach out to Picker Financial Solutions, see the links in this episode's notes. If this podcast has made you realize that you or a friend would benefit from having a chat, please don't hesitate to reach out to experts like Lifeline, Beyond Blue, or a medical professional. In the meantime, take care, look after your lid, and look forward to the next episode of This Is Your Line and Length.